Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Forging Healthy Communities through Civic Engagement. I'm Mia Birdsong. I'm the Executive Director of Next River, an Institute for Practicing the Future. And look it up. And I'm also your host for this session, and I'm delighted and thrilled to be here. I'm going to just go ahead and introduce our speakers while we're waiting for Morgan. So we have Stephen Lucky over here, who is an activist and food systems expert. In 2015, he founded an organization called Gardopia Gardens to help solve the challenges facing his community in San Antonio, Texas. Gardopia Gardens stewards 10 acres of land, impacting 2,000 young people weekly. Their work with educational and community institutions to ensure current and future generations have the knowledge and skills to cultivate a high quality of life for themselves and society is part of why he's here with us today. And they do lots of other things, which I'm sure he'll talk about. Then we have Dr. Alistair Martin. He is an emergency room physician. If anybody has a heart attack or a stroke up in here or a wound, you're in good hands. You're going to be good. He is also faculty member at the Center for Social Justice and Health Equity at Harvard Medical School, an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and the Harvard Kennedy School, and he previously served as an advisor in the Office of the Vice President under Kamala Harris as an appointed White House fellow. As the founder of Vote ER, which is VOT-ER, so that's like voter, that's a dad joke, I've been told. It is a nonpartisan voter registration organization, and he and his colleagues have organized over 26,000 healthcare providers in 300 hospitals to help non-urgent patients register to vote. And then, yes, right? Last but not least, we have Morgan Dixon, who is co-founder and CEO of Girl Trek, the largest health movement in the United States for Black women, with over 1 million members. Under her leadership, Girl Trek won the Audacious Prize, a historic investment given to, that's right, the boldest ideas for social change. Dixon has given 2 major TED Talks. I was there live to see one of them. It was amazing. You should look them up. And she hosts a viral podcast, which she was just recording, called Black History Boot Camp. Is that what you were recording? Okay, yes. Just now. She was named among the top 1% of social innovators in the world with fellowships from Echoing Green, Ashoka, and the Aspen Institute. Yay. She's currently a visiting innovator at the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government and works from Ghana, West Africa, though she just moved to South Carolina, so that part's a lie, to unite women and girls worldwide for health justice. Give our amazing experts a hand. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to ask them some questions. Then I might ask some follow-up questions. You will have an opportunity to ask a question. I will remind you then that a question is going to be one idea with a question mark at an end. And just like uplifting your voice at the end, don't make it a question. So make it an actual question. That's how this is going to go. So we're going to start with Alistair. So can you talk to us about why it's so important that healthcare providers and the healthcare sector at large support their patients in voting?
First of all, thank you so much for bringing us together, and thank you all for listening and being part of this discussion. Some of you might be thinking, what the hell is a doctor doing promoting voting? Like, where does that come from? So I want to start with the problem that we're trying to solve. In this country, we have 60 million people who are unregistered but eligible voters. That's the entire country of Spain in terms of people who are not part of our political discourse and part of our political conversations. And so when I look at the demographics of who is not registered to vote but eligible to vote in this country, the same exact people who are in my waiting room in the emergency room. They tend to be younger, tend to be lower income, more likely than not, tend to be people of color. And the ramifications of this are vast, okay? Let me take you to my world for a second in the ER. Folks think that the ER is all about gunshot wounds and strokes and heart attacks, and there is that. But 40% of the people who show up to the emergency room don't need to be in the emergency room. They're there because they have nowhere else to go. They're in the emergency room on a Friday night with abdominal pain, not because they have appendicitis or a UTI, but because they haven't eaten in 3 days. They're there on a Tuesday night when it's 2 degrees outside in Boston because they have nowhere else to go. And they need a place to sleep. Or they need me to write them a work note or a prescription. And one of these patients that I saw about now 7 years ago is the patient that really kicked this off, this work for me. I had a young mom of 2. She was in her early 20s. And she came to the ER on a Friday night around 2 a.m. And she said to me, "Doctor, look, I had to move recently, about 4 or 5 months ago, because the father of my child, of my children, became abusive. And I didn't have anywhere else to go. And so I moved from another state to Boston because I had an aunt here. But over the course of the last couple of days, my aunt, because of her mental health issues, things had gotten worse, and she and I got into it, and she actually kicked me and the kids out last night. And last night we slept in the van, and it was 2 degrees outside, and we were going to do the same thing tonight." She said, "I turned around, I looked back, and I saw my little 3-year-old and heard his teeth shattering. And I knew I couldn't do that to them again today. Can you help me?" For the healthcare providers in the room, you will recognize this feeling of like the patient is asking you for a very reasonable thing, but the healthcare system can't deliver. Of course, I didn't say that to her. I said, "Of course we're going to take care of you, don't worry about it." So I did what any good, self-respecting ER doctor would do. I called social work. I was like, "Hey, we got this woman. She's here. I'm not sending her to the shelter. It's unsafe. What you got?" And the social worker was like, "No problem. We have a state program, transitional housing program. As long as she has some proof of residence that demonstrates that she's a Massachusetts resident, we can get her into their hotel or motel for the night." So he's like, "You need to ask her if she has a check stub or a phone bill." So I go back to the patient. I said, "Do you have a check stub or a phone bill, something that says that you live in the state of Massachusetts?" She says, "No, doctor. As I told you, I just moved back, to Boston." I said, "Okay, no problem, ma'am. Don't worry about it." I call the social worker back. She's got nothing. She doesn't have a check stub or phone bill. Who carries that anyway? The social worker says, "I'm sorry, it's a Massachusetts program. We can't help her if she's not a Mass resident." I said, "There's got to be something we can do." He says, "All right, well, there's one thing." I said, "What's that?" He said, "We can register her to vote."
Stop. Oh, my God.
Buckle up, Nia. Buckle up. Buckle up. So I was like, "What? Hold up." First of all, I went to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government for like 2 years and never learned that you could do voter registration in healthcare settings and it's like legal. So I want my money back from Harvard. But the second thing...
All that money, yes.
But the second thing I said, I was like, "Am I going to get fired for this?" And he said, "No, the National Voter Registration Act encourages voter registration in healthcare settings." So I went back to the patient. I said, "Look, we're going to help you. I just have kind of a weird question for you. Do you want to register to vote?" And her response still to this day sticks with me. She said, "I didn't know I could. No one has ever asked me that before." And I had taken care of like 20,000 patients up until that point, and a light bulb went off for me. Well, maybe we can use this as an opportunity to bring patients in to the democratic process, leveraging the trusted messengers, meeting patients where they're at, but leaving them different, right? And so that is the origin story of the work that we do at VoteER. We now have 700 hospitals across the country doing voter registration in all 50 states plus DC. We've registered about almost 100,000 patients now. The voter turnout rate's about 86%, which is 20 percentage points higher than the general election turnout rates. And we're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface here.
So tell me some about how you're creating these tools for healthcare systems and a little bit more about the impact and maybe some about what you envision.
Yeah, the vision is clear. I mean, like any hospital, healthcare setting, clinic you walk into, of course, if it's a non-urgent issue, there will be some nudge around voter registration, right? That's the vision. That's the future that we're building here. The tools to get us there are the following. Number one, I'm wearing one. We have these things called healthy democracy kits. Every physician has to wear an ID. Most wear lanyards to hold their IDs. This is called a visual trigger. The patient will often ask me, hey doctor, why does your lanyard say vote on it? And I'll say, well, it says vote on it because I want you to take 30 seconds right now and use your phone and scan this QR code or this text code and register to vote. We have 50,000 doctors, nurses, medical students around the country wearing these. They're free. This is how it shows up in your mailbox about 2 weeks later. We're going to get to the calls to action a little bit later, but that's what these look like. That's one. Number two, we have about 700 hospitals with posters, discharge paperwork, and handouts in their settings doing voter registration. And three, we have community health centers that are sending text messages encouraging voter registration. That's all grassroots work. And I think it's really important to get the grassroots advocacy right. But you don't get to the vision of the future we talked about through grassroots advocacy alone. We also mobilize at the grass tops. So we pressed on the AMA, the American Medical Association, to pass a resolution acknowledging voting as a social determinant of health. We work with HHS and VA to share our best practices so that the thousands of FQHCs in this country, federally qualified health clinics, can do voter registration. And we work with governors all across the country to sign proclamations announcing or proclaiming August as Civic Health Month, which is a national month of action with healthcare-based voter registration at the center of it. It's not just that, though. We also make sure that we are putting resources in patients' pockets. Why? Many of the patients who I talk to will say, doctor, why bother? Voting has never helped me. Why bother? And when I was in the White House working in administration, what I found was that there's over $80 billion in federal aid program funding that goes unspent every year. We're now leveraging that money, putting it in the pockets of patients to pay their rent, pay their phone bills, lower their heating bills, so that we can answer the question, why bother? Hooking them up with these resources and then registering them to vote in 3 to 6 months. So that's some of the work that we do.
I just have a quick follow-up question. So you're not registering all these people so that they can have proof of residency. Why is it specifically important to you as a doctor and to the healthcare system that this population of people who are overrepresenting those 60 million people who are eligible but not voting, why is it important to the healthcare system that these folks vote?
I'm going to give you the soundbite, and then we're going to get a little bit esoteric. The soundbite is politics influences the care I give to my patients, period. Full stop. The little bit more esoteric answer is, look, at the end of the day, the voting proportion, right, the people who are voting, the electorate in our country, is different than the American public at large. It's missing 60 million people. And so the electorate that's voting is voting what? For their best interests. And those best interests are not serving our most vulnerable patients. And so until and unless we bring those folks into the conversation, we're necessarily going to have a healthcare system that is broken, or perhaps I should say it another way, the healthcare system is working exactly as it's intended to. But that's a different panel.
Yes. Thank you so much. So we know that civic engagement is expansive, right? Voting is absolutely part of that, but there are these other pieces. So Stephen, I want you to talk about how are you creating change outside of voting for the community that you work with?
Well, yeah, so I'm going to take a bit of a history lesson. 10,000 years ago, we went from hunter-gatherers and a nomadic lifestyle to more of an agrarian. There's evidence in the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates River, as well as in Africa and Asia. We had traveled the world, we had collected all the animals and all the seeds and all the plants, and we didn't need to travel anymore. We could stay in one space and we could grow food and start society, and had time to think about government and other opportunities to expand what it means to be a human. So let's fast forward up until World War I and World War II. During both of those global issues, there was a mobilization here in America for people to grow food. During World War I in the 1920s, there was the School Garden Army, the Department of Education. And during World War II, there were victory gardens, which close to 16 million people were growing food in their front yards, on their rooftops, all throughout the cities. After World War II, things in America started to change a little, specifically around our food system. You have the advent and the rise of fast food, with Ray Kroc and McDonald's and Wendy's and Pizza Hut and Sonic. At the same point in time, with the increase of technology, we start moving into more of a sedentary lifestyle. So you have what is called the standard American diet, which is highly processed carbohydrates, preservatives, saturated fats. And at the same point in time, you also have us moving less and being less involved in our food system. And so we have an extreme decrease in the public health, which sort of hit a climax in 2020 with the public health crisis and the pandemic. And we're also experiencing a climate crisis at the same time. And so it is my belief that our personal health and the health of the planet are mirrors of each other. And for us to heal one, we must heal the other. And so we've taken the approach of food as a way to heal people and heal the planet. And so where does that get into civic engagement, right? Well, we do encourage people to get registered to vote. There's some great organizations in Texas and across the nation who are doing that to do voter mobilization. But we believe also that outside of the ballot, there is two things that you can do. And one of those things is use your money and use your actions to create change. I believe, and I have these quick stats, in the 2020 elections, there was 66% of people turned out, eligible voters, and $14 billion were spent on that election. In 2022, the Texas election, y'all may have heard about that. And I'm sorry, our representatives of Texas don't represent the people, okay?
All right.
In 2022, 45% of eligible voters turned out, so about 1 in 2, and $303 million were spent on that election. And in little old San Antonio, Texas, we have a hard time getting even 10% of our voters to turn out, and $3.7 million were spent. So you have a large swath of population who is not involved in the opportunity to elect their representatives and have a voice at the table. So what we says is, let's vote for Earth. Well, you may not believe in the electoral process. There might be voter apathy. You don't believe that it's going to change because it hasn't changed for a lot of us for a long time. You can do things such as planting trees, composting, starting gardens, using reusable materials, renewable energy, right? There are things that we as individuals can invest in that are going to start to hopefully influence policy through those dollars. And then your actions. Since 2020, we have adopted and planted over 1,000 trees. We're planting large orchards and food forests at our schools and our public parks. We are impacting, as she mentioned a little bit earlier, almost 2,000 youth on a weekly basis, where we're going in and providing that education and teaching our next generation. I like to say that we're on the 20-year plan. Essentially, if every child is getting this education around healthy, sustainable living between 2020 and 2040, then it'll be part of the culture, and we won't have to teach because it is a part of our shared knowledge and information. Additionally, beyond just your dollars and your actions, we also organize people in participating in the City of San Antonio's opportunities for public engagement. And so there's something called Citizens to be Heard, where every Wednesday you can go talk to your elected officials. There's something called San Antonio Speak Up, which is essentially a survey that the city puts out that directs their budget during the budget planning process, which is happening right now. Most recently, we worked with our Metro Health Department, our Office of Sustainability Department, our World Heritage Office, and we organized a discussion around the food system with the United Nations Food System Summit that happened in 2021. And what came out of that, again, there was no voting involved, but there were a lot of voices at the table. The City of San Antonio ended up allocating about $400,000 to hire a food policy coordinator and to implement a state of the food system assessment. And so that's how we are approaching it from an outside of the ballot perspective.
I love that. So part of what I hear you saying is that folks who are not voting are still being organized to influence policy. And that actually is, like, that's what you're demonstrating in San Antonio. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important for people to actually be in relationship and contact with their elected officials, and what the results of that are?
Well, I think it's a thing of persistence and attrition, right? We know that our elected officials are being hounded every day for different bills and different policies, and everybody wants change here in America. And so, anecdotally, in 2020, we knew that there were funds were coming into our cities through the American Recovery Plan Act, right, ARPA. And so I was sending out emails to all of our elected officials like, hey, let's invest $1 million into our food system because we know our food system is broke. We're seeing these global supply chains that are breaking down. People are rushing to the stores. We have this big grocery store called H-E-B that's supplying us. And guess what? The shelves were empty because everybody is rushing. So we started to feel how brittle our food system can be. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm sending these emails, and so are some of our other folks. That's 2020. Nothing happens. 2021, we do it again because the ARPA was given in 2 distributions, and San Antonio got about $600 million or so. 2022, again, right? Finally, this past year, we've stayed consistent. I sit on a couple of boards, including the Food Policy Council of San Antonio and the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance in Texas. And so what's happened is over consistently interfacing and showing that this is a priority in our community. Finally, we had a report with Stanford University of the Natural Capital Project, some of y'all may be familiar with, which is quantifying how much urban agriculture can provide ecosystem services and address food insecurity. So now we're in this budgeting process currently. We're having folks fill out that essay Speak Up, and I'm very confident that a large swath of dollars will go towards our food system, specifically because there's what's been created is a $10 million pot of funding for sustainability initiatives over the next 5 years for a total of $50 million. So again, it takes time, but I think with that consistency and that persistence from community members, you will see that policy change, which will lead to the resources.
This is what we call organizing. Yes, I love it. Thank you, Stephen. Morgan.
Yes.
With over 1 million members, Girl Trek represents 7% of Black women in America. Can you, what? So what does meaningful participation look like for each Black woman who is a member?
It looks like hope. It looks like belief in an American dream. And, that's not popular now. I sat across the table from a guy who was a veteran, and his arms are crossed, and I suspected he was on the opposite end of the political spectrum. And it was the week that the young man was killed by Black police officers in Memphis, where I'm from. And people were just outraged around the table. Mostly white women, Black women here, this brother here. And they were just like, I just cannot take it anymore. That's what was happening. And then it got to me, and I said, well, I just really believe in the American dream. And everybody was like, shut up. And after, the guy came up to me, and he unfolded his arms, and he said, I am so grateful for you. He said, because I fought for this country, and he said, the politicians are trying to destroy it, is what he said. And so when you have 1 million Black women opening their front doors, lacing up their sneakers, and walking outside in communities that have been described here, the most powerful thing we can do is have enough hope to want to do that every day. So what we inspire women to do is to walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, in their own neighborhoods, out of their front doors. And then once they establish a habit of saving their own lives, which that's a life-saving habit, they then use the model that we call the Tubman Doctrine, because we study our ancestors for asset framing around liberation. And Harriet Tubman left, found her way to freedom, and then came back and got other people. So one of the 1 million women are charged to go out in their communities, walk to save their own lives, and then come back and get a sister. We say 2 equals a crew. So a Girl Trek crew is 2 women walking in their neighborhood. Turns out crews are also 180 church ladies. It's like, I'm pretty sure you guys don't have a permit. I get the most bizarre calls all the time.
We always
too much. The mayor of Detroit called me one time. She was like, is this Morgan? I was like, yeah. She was like, you have a lot of women walking across a bridge.
People start to get nervous when we gather.
She was like, it's okay, I'm sending the police out. I was like, okay, well, I don't know. So, so that's a Tubman doctrine. So step 1 is you walk to save your own life. 2 is you come back to get a sister. 3 is you rally your allies. These are my allies, you are my allies. They are people who are committed to our mission, which is to increase the life expectancy of Black women by 10 years in 10 years. You rally your allies. And then 4, Harriet Tubman lived to be 90, and she planted apple trees, and she did all sorts of amazing things. So step number 4 is to find joy. There's no justice without joy. That's why I say I believe in the American dream, in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe in it. If we can't have those values, where do we start? And so I believe in joy and I believe in justice. And so if that is not the end game, then I don't want to be a part of any revolution where we're not dancing. So that's what a million Black women are charged to do. Then we have a sophisticated strategy after that where the most energized get involved in things like this. But that is enough. It's enough for, right now we represent 7% of the total population, which is, about 1 in 14 Black houses has a Girl Trek member, which means we can do all of this. It means we're an army of do-gooders that are waiting to support the causes we believe in. We are waiting. I was talking to people in Montgomery yesterday. Shout out to the activists in Alabama who just won that Supreme Court victory in gerrymandering. Yes, yeah. So the chief plaintiff, his wife, is an attorney, just an incredibly just powerful Black people. And I was talking to her yesterday, and I was like, well, we want to come to Montgomery. I was like, but we're new there. I said, but we have 22,000 members there. And she's like, well, I have 22,000 members. Yeah, and so that's power. That's people power. And so there isn't anything we can't do. So what has started happening is like presidential candidates have started calling, and big health systems have started calling about how do we get people into the door. And now we are in a position to decide how we want to change the systems that make it necessary for Girl Trek to exist.
So I'm a Black woman, in case you didn't know. And I turned 50 this year.
Ooh, you look good.
Thank you. I'm also almost 2 years into being a cancer survivor.
Yes.
So your mission, right, is to increase the life expectancy of Black women by 10 years in 10 years.
Yeah.
What is killing Black women prematurely? What is robbing us of our lives? And what's your long-range plan?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I was just on a podcast outside, and it's a walking podcast. You're all invited. It's called Black History Boot Camp. We take a lesson from Black history. We use it as a blueprint in order to move forward. But mostly it's me and my best friend telling all of our deepest secrets and everyone laughing. It's complete, and we open the lines and people call it. It's too much. It's not, none of that's recommended on a podcast. It's hilarious. It's great. And millions of people walk with us at the same time that we're walking. And today's lesson was chase your care. We're doing 21 pleasure principles, and Wilma Rudolph died from cancer prematurely because she was an activist and an ambassador for the UN and all sorts of things, and she had brain cancer and it was undiagnosed. And so the notion of this runner like not being able to run fast enough toward healthcare, do you understand what I mean, is something that we all understand. And so the answer to your question, what's killing Black women, we have listened. We've spoken to all sorts of smart people in this room who I recognize. We've listened to 1 million Black women, and we've boiled it down to 3 things that we call the 3 I's. One is inactivity. Sitting is deadly. That if we just move 30 minutes a day, we can increase life expectancy by, some people say 5 years, some people say up to 10 years. Part of that is walking outside with vitamin D. We're vitamin D deficiency, particularly Black people, but all of us, so don't listen to the Coppertone ads, like get outside. It's really, really harmful. And then, so number 1 is inactivity. Number 2 is isolation. That loneliness, particularly as you age, is deadlier than cigarette smoking. It is deadly to be alone. And so walking in groups outside builds social cohesion, gets you fresh air, connection to nature, but also gets you active, gets your heart pumping. And then 3 is injustice. That we have someone on our board who is an incredible researcher named Dr. Bennett out of Duke, and he was giving a presentation to our staff 2 weeks ago, and he said, heart disease is still killing Black women. and it comes from hypertension. And I was like, excuse me, what's hypertension? It's just like, we're not you. So I was like, tell the people what hypertension is. And he was like, well, it means that, your something is constricted or something. And then I was like, great, what causes it? And he was like, diet, exercise, and stress. And there's a lot of different kinds of stress, perceived stress and actual stress. And all of that is baked into injustice. And so we have to solve for injustice. And as a critical mass of Black women, we're in a power to do that. So inactivity, isolation, and injustice, the way that we're solving for that strategically is pretty clever. One, we inspire women to walk. Right? That's an activity. That's easy. We do these campaigns. We do boot camp. We do all kinds of amazing things globally to inspire women to walk. Women are walking in 140 countries with Girl Trek. I was in Rwanda at Lake Kivu, if anybody knows Rwanda, on vacation, getting far away from Girl Trek, kayaking, living my best life. And then I saw a refugee camp and these women that were working so hard, and I was like, man, if we could just bring them together to walk, talk, and solve problems together. And then I get back to Kigali, and one of the organizers in Rwanda was like, Morgan, I saw your pictures on Instagram. I was like, what do you mean? She goes, why didn't you meet with the trekkers in Lake Kivu? And I was like, there are trekkers in Lake Kivu? She goes, yeah. I go, where do they get the shirts? She goes, we wear these bright blue shirts. So we're all over the world. We inspire women to walk. That's inactivity. We are training an army of women to do exactly what you all are doing. Women to plant Girl Trek gardens, women to register people to vote. They're community health activists that knock on doors. But mostly what they are doing is asking people if they're okay. Knocking on our neighbors' doors and saying, are you okay? We're trained in mental health first aid, and there is a gap between mental health crisis and emergency care in our country, and that has led to isolation. So we really are directly solving for that, almost like paramedics did back in the day, in the 70s when paramedicine was invented. So we are doing that as kind of doorstep paramedics. And then last, we are changing the narrative. We are using asset framing in Black history to do everything from doing Black history walking tours in historic places like Montgomery. We're doing a walk from Selma to Montgomery. We are changing the script that Black people are victims, because we aren't. We are survivors, and we are thrivers, and we are heroes. And so we are changing that, because if you don't believe that there is a pathway for you, there's no way you can walk it. So that's what we're doing. And we believe that all those things together, behavior change, narrative change, and systems change through activism, is going to increase the life expectancy of Black women.
I love how you get from this intervention that seems super simple, which is just put your shoes on and go outside and walk, right? 30 minutes a day, to changing policy, to reframing narratives. That is that's sneaky.
Yeah.
I love it. That's amazing.
Do you know Brent Smith, the ocean farmer? He's very smart. Maybe some people in here know him. He goes, Girl Trek's the biggest Trojan horse in America.
Yes. Seriously.
I was like, well, don't tell anybody.
Y'all,
I don't think we're
sworn to
exercise
secrecy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. Over here, we have a question. We have a mic. You have to speak into the mic, because that's what they told me. I don't know why. No, right here first, in the blue shirt up here. There we go.
Wow. Thank you. I know you've talked to the VA. I know you've talked with HHS. Just want to put out there, FEMA. Lots of funding on community mitigation.
So the question is, do any of you
working it?
use FEMA money?
No, it's a good
Because-
idea.
Who do you know?
Well, seriously, we'll talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because what you're doing, the social capital building, predicts recovery from disaster. It predicts the trajectory. So, climate change, okay, so there's money.
There's this amazing researcher, David Eldridge, who I fangirled once, and I'm sure he was not expecting that. I don't think that happens to him ever. And his research, the body of research that I was particularly interested in, that I studied for many years, was about how which communities survive disasters, right? Whether it is climate disaster or I don't know, explosions, whatever it is. And what he found is that the communities that survive, the communities that recover the quickest, are not the ones that have the most wealth, are not the ones where the first responders show up first, but are the ones that have the most social connection.
Yeah.
Social connection saves our lives in so many ways. Thank you for that. All right, and then you with the yellow lanyard and the very sweet haircut that I like.
No wash.
Giving away all the secrets, I love it.
Do you work with, as a farm girl, raised on the farm, but just outside of Chicago, do you work with the extension agents of the county and of Texas? They're located with the universities, the land-grant universities. Mm-hmm. For years, they have done this with people with gardens, people with the farms. But this would bring the farmers or the rural folks to the city folks and connect people, which has been going on with 4-H forever. But are you already involved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So Texas A&M is the land-grant university for Texas, which was segregated. Prairie View A&M is the land-grant university that was established for African Americans. Yeah, so PVAM has also been a partner with us. So yes, we have collaborated with the extension agents for Bexar County. In the current moment, about $13 million has been allocated to build a 10-acre urban farm in San Antonio, which is really going to be a state-of-the-art facility that will be, I think, having us be the capital of urban agriculture. In regards to 4-H and some other programs, those do exist, but just historically, they have not been implemented in inner-city communities and schools. And so there is a big gap in who is being served by the Extension Office currently.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I would love to.
All right, we got a question over here. A question.
This is actually a question.
Great.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. I think taking off my corporate hat for why I'm here, I would love, as a young person involved in advocacy, just to ask, how do you stay motivated? And how do you stay engaged and keep young people engaged who might feel a little bit like downtrodden, I guess, during this time? And that's speaking as a white woman with a whole lot of privilege. And I know that your communities might feel even more tired. So I was just wondering, what are your strategies for that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Yeah. I'm tired. We're tired. We're tired. Someone yesterday, a very cool guy at dinner, said, Morgan, I'm just worried about you, there's you and Vanessa. Vanessa's a co-founder of Girl Check. You're doing big things, and how are you going to do it? And, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like putting this on me. And I said, I'm not the bucket, I'm the water. And then he was like, well, okay. And what I meant by that is you better find your alignment. And I don't know if you call it God, I don't know if you call it mindfulness, I don't care what you call it. How do you find balance in yourself every day before you are confronted with the injustice of the world? If it's family time, if it's taking a run, whatever your care practices are paramount now in this moment of transformation. They are paramount, and you cannot lead anyone else. And boy, we need you to in corporate America. You cannot lead anybody else until you start from that base. And it sounds so hokey, put your mask on, but boy, when you don't do it, there is so much coming at you with social media, like grabbing your attention every day with all this kind of news. And I mean, it is swirling around us. And I think the most radical thing we can all do is slow down. I really do. And so I invite you, young white woman, anybody in here, to slow down and take a walk. Just slow down. I mean, it is a mindfulness practice of slowing down. And even when you're out walking, you see somebody run by, you're like, must run. I mean, it is, we are so programmed to produce. And you are worth more than the labor you provide. And so we just have to start there.
I feel like you're speaking to a very existential, deep question, right? Yeah. And what you just said about how we are all socialized to essentially believe that our value comes from being productive, as opposed to our value comes from our mere existence, right? Like that is a deeply held belief we have in America, and it takes a lot of unpacking So I would add that in addition to a practice of slowing down, like we actually have to start to interrogate why it's uncomfortable to slow down, right? And I think that mindfulness piece, right? Yeah. Like, oh God, when I had to start meditating, my traditional Chinese medicine person who I saw when I had cancer was like, you need to start meditating. And I was so irritated by it. But part of it is because he knows that the kind of cancer that I had, which was not genetic, was like environmental and was about me, right? Was like, and not in a like blamey way, but that part of like us saving our own lives is returning to something that is more fundamentally human than producing.
Yeah.
I want you to,
can I build on that?
I mean, because I'm not actually a panelist.
I think you really I think Morgan really nailed it. I think you can't pour from an empty cup, first and foremost. But to your question of what gives me hope, I'll give you a quick story. So in the early days of Vote ER, when we were creating our first model, which the first iteration of Vote ER were these kiosks that we built and we deployed into waiting rooms all across the country. So we had like 25 hospitals that had these kiosks where patients could register to vote. And we distributed dozens of these through January 2020, February 2020, and then into March of 2020 when a global pandemic hit. And now it became unconscionable to be touching a kiosk in an emergency room, right? No less. But before the pandemic hit, it was maybe like February of 2020, and I was like hustling around the emergency room. I was not working that day, but I was setting up the kiosk to make sure that it was ready for patients to register to vote. And it just so happens that in our emergency room, there's an internal waiting room where the kiosk was, and basically a number of seats where patients could sit. And so I came in, sort of in a little bit of a frantic fury to go and make sure that this kiosk could work. I had my white coat on and like unplugging the thing, trying to reset it. And this elderly black woman sees me, futzing with the kiosk. And above the kiosk is a big sign that says, register to vote here. And this woman asked me, she said, doctor, what is that you're doing right there? And I said, well, ma'am, this is a kiosk that folks can use to register to vote while they're here. And she said, so you're helping people vote here in the hospital? Is that right? And I was like, yeah, that's what we're doing, because it's important for people's health to have a voice and to help create the policies and laws that we are governed by. And she proceeded to tell me a story about her father. She'd come from the South. She was in her 70s or 80s. She came from the South, and she told me that she watched year after year as county administrators and officials got between her father and the ballot box. How they made him take literacy tests. How they made him pay poll taxes. And how there was this just all-out effort to stop her father and her family from voting. And she tells me this story, and she says to me, like, God bless you. Thank you for doing this work. You don't know how important it is to me to see that we live in a world now where you can go to your doctor and to a hospital and be encouraged to register to vote. And so I think a lot about, like, we think we have it hard right now. Mm-hmm. Shit, bro. Like, we think we have it hard?
Yeah.
Come on. Like, and can you imagine if you were back there and we brought that, like, I don't know if I could do it energy? Nothing would have changed. So I look at it as a privilege, man, to like be in this position to try and push the conversation forward. And I'm not going to get it done in my time, right? We're going to pass it on, pass the ballot to the next, the baton to the next generation.
No, we're definitely getting it done in our time. What are you talking about?
That's it.
What the hell are we doing this for? Don't you say that.
All right, pieces of it we will get done.
No,
didn't-
Dr. King said the moral arc of the universe bends toward is long, but it bends toward justice. We are in that bend. Listen, there were a small group of people who were active in those movements. There really were. They were still trying to engage people. And time over time over time, we've gotten the critical mass engaged. I'm telling you, this is nothing compared to the road we've traveled. You're right. But we are in that bend, and justice is here. It is possible. We have to believe that it's possible. There's no way we can believe that this is going to be in our children's lives. Climate change, we are at a decision point. We are at a breaking point. Our culture is at a breaking point. Our bodies are at a breaking point. Our earth is at a breaking point. We have to solve for these things right now. So I love you, brother, and we're going to do it together. We're going to do it together.
One track at a time, you know what I'm saying?
One track at a time. Put your sneakers on.
What about you, Stephen? What keeps you motivated, gives you hope?
There's a few things. I think that you talked about meditation. So when I was younger, going down the path of what's my life going to be, right? I found that being in tune with nature was something that I would be happy doing every day. There's a lot of energy that comes from the earth, right? We know there's electromagnetic waves, and eating healthy, there's something called the mind-gut connection, where what we eat is influencing our microbiome, which is influencing our mental health. And so for me, it's first that personal wellness, and I can't be the champion for the team if I'm not at 100%. Yeah. And then secondly, when you're a cultivator, a gardener, a farmer, you learn patience, and you realize, I'm planting a tree today for the future, for the next 25 years. They say the best time to plant your tree was today, and the next best time was 25 years ago. And so, I believe, and there's sort of a quote, I might be messing it up, it's to plant a garden is to have hope for the future. And so we're planting these trees for our future generations, but we have to do it right now. And urgency is key. And so that's what gives me hope, is that when I see that fruit tree that I planted 5 years ago finally producing apples and oranges and pears, and I know that our ancestors have done that, and they've created food for us, and they've created healthy living and sustainable living and been stewards of this planet. And I know that history repeats itself, so I think that we can move towards a more just and symbiotic living with our community and the planet.
That is beautiful.
It was beautiful.
All right, we're going to go to call to action. I'm gonna take moderator's privilege and start, which is that we are in this beautiful place, right? Every one of you needs to go for a 30-minute walk today in this place, right? Slow down, skip whatever session you thought you needed to go to. If necessary, find another person and go for a walk. So that's my call to action. It's super easy. I'm gonna start with you, Stephen, though.
My call to action is everybody can grow a percentage of their food. I think everybody can grow between 10 to 25% of your food. And if everybody's growing 10 to 25% of your food, you're reducing your food miles and your carbon footprint by 10 to 25%. And at scale, if we do that, we can start to see the greenhouse gases come down. We can also start to see our nutritional values increase, and we can also start to create communities. So I encourage everybody to start planting community gardens, home gardens, school gardens, to grow food, to be connected to our food system, and to bring community back. And if you have any questions, you can follow us at Gardopia Gardens. There's many movements, as she mentioned, AgriLife Extension offices, other nonprofits all throughout the state. So get connected with what's happening locally.
Mm-hmm. All right, Alistair.
Got 2 calls to action. First, for the healthcare providers in the room, or if you know a healthcare provider in your life, tell them to get on board. Get one of these kits. It's vot-er.org/kit. These are free. You can help register your patients to vote with them. And there's a way to track your own impact, so you can see how many people you registered to vote in the lead up to some of the big elections. We've got a big one in 2024 next year, so in case folks are not checking the calendar. The second call to action is for institutions and organizations. We are channeling over $80 billion in unspent federal aid program funding to pay people's rents, lower their electricity costs, pay their phone bills. We want to leverage that money, put it directly in the pockets of low-income patients so we can change lives. So if you're interested in partnering on that, reach out to me. You can find my email in the app.
Thank you. All right, Morgan.
Yes. I am interested in partnering with you on however many billions of dollars that was. The call to action for everybody in this room, my email address is morgan@girltrek.org. That's the call to action. Email me if you can help us with 3 things. First of all, we're increasing the life expectancy of Black women. We need help in 3 ways. If you are someone like the folks here who your actual work is going to increase life expectancy for Black women, please call me and be a coalition partner. We want to build the biggest tent ever. So that's number 1, morgan@girltrek.org. Number 2, we're raising something called a Waymaker Fund, where we're doing miles for dollars. So if a woman wants to start a Black beekeeping company, she gets people together, all of her beekeepers together, they walk 1,000 miles, they get $1,000. We want to raise $1 million for that. If you are a funder, please help us. And number 3, oh God, I forgot number 3. It was a good one too. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, number 3. So we are doing a place-based strategy now where we are buying historic buildings and creating walking tours through them. And we have about 4 cities that have the funding, have the Black history, and want to help us revitalize and create more walkable communities. If your city is one of them and you want to help rally, we want to build about 10 of these flagship, what we're calling care villages. It's about 3 or 5 years out. We're doing the first one now. We can't do them all at once, but we do want to have the cities lined up. So email me at morgan@girltrek.org.
Thank you. Can we thank our panelists, y'all?